Welcome to the Discerning the Forms podcast. I'm Nick.
I'm Anthony.
We're glad to
Episode
have
2.
you. Yes, episode 2.
Number 2.
So, Anthony, take it away. I'm trying to cut this music. It's
Okay. Cut the
turning
music.
out to be. Oh, there we go. I'll get
Got
the
it?
hang of it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the last episode, we obviously did sort of more of our stories and kind of where we are. And it probably did encompass everything, but now we're going to try to begin on the journey of recapturing wholeness in our perspective, from the intellectual to the emotional to the political, like all these things we're trying to reintegrate. And so part of it today is, I think, probably I find the most foundational part of when I began to start to reintegrate things in my mind and my heart. And because we always talk about, you want the heart to connect with the mind, and how that
Right.
it's always seeming to be fractured for people. And so today we're going to talk about aesthetics, which I think is the link, um, from the head to the heart. I think the modern fracturing of the emotional element of human beings to the intellect is really best reintegrated through, the aesthetic realm.
Awesome.
And so we'll get
Okay.
into more of that. So
Yeah. So,
aesthetics.
yeah, aesthetics. And that might kind of sound interesting because, I don't know, seems weird to start out with that.
It
If you're
does, yeah.
sometimes with philosophy we do you would start out in your philosophy 101 class either with kind of a walk through a history of philosophy and all the concepts, or like answering life's
Yeah.
ultimate questions or something, but we think in
Hmm.
the end, yeah, it really at least captures, we need to move forward as a culture and a society, and a lot of the things that we see that are messed up, the sign of the times, is us not taking in
Hmm.
all these aspects of what we were made or created to be.
Hmm.
So aesthetics, I always think of, I mean, you think of art, right? And you think of,
Hmm.
sometimes people talk about like an aesthetic someone has, maybe a style,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
or sometimes people say, and I hear this in a critical way too sometimes, like, well, that's just aesthetics, and I have the real thing, which is some kind of rational process. What do we mean
Right.
by aesthetics, and kind of where are you headed with that?
Yeah. So I think, a really good, excuse me, starting point. David Bentley Hart, in his book, The Beauty of the Infinite, which I recommend it to literally everybody I meet who does and loves theology, because I think it does. David Bentley Hart does some really important work in that. For he talks about how the Christian response to evil and suffering, and even like the postmodern idea that existence is inevitable violence, and it's about subjugation, and that's what existence actually is. He talks about the Christian response is an aesthetic response of infinite peace. Yeah, of infinite peace, which is God, who is the creator, right? The triune God, who is love, is an infinite peace against the violence of chaos and sin and death. And so he talks about, and we'll get into epistemology a little bit, I think, because I think you have to sort of travail some of that stuff to
Yeah, you do.
help recognize why aesthetics is why I think it's foundational. So he says, for Christian thought, then delight is the premise of any sound epistemology. It is delight that constitutes creation, and so only in delight can comprehend it, see it aright, understand its grammar. Only in loving creation's beauty, only in seeing that creation truly is beauty, does one apprehend what creation is.
Wow.
So, which I completely agree. I think it is. That is the only.
Can
I
you
think
unpack
beauty
that?
is the way forward.
It's
Yes, right.
good.
So,
It's rich.
so sort
Yeah.
of what. So in traditional philosophy, especially like Platonic, classical philosophy, Um, there are three categories. There's truth, goodness, and beauty,
Yeah,
and
from
these three
Plato,
things
right?
need to exist
Yeah.
in what you're talking about. Plato
Yeah.
talks about this, right? And for knowledge to be constituted, those three things need to be present in what you're talking about. So if one of those things is missing, you don't have knowledge, or the thing itself is not, true. So, and I think for Hart, and what he's getting at here is that God himself is beauty. And this gets even, I think, I don't know if we can get into this, and maybe we'll later on, but divine simplicity, I think, is another element which is really important to understanding sort of Hart's argument, is that to perceive creation, we have to perceive it as God has created it to be. And God created it not out of utility or out of necessity,
Yeah.
but out of just like unconditional creative delight.
He didn't
That
need
God
something to
created.
love, right?
Yes, God had no need for anything. Creation is completely needless in that way. And that may sound bad to people, but that actually makes it very good and meaningful, because God did not create it because he was missing something and lacking something in himself. What he wanted to create was, he created so he could commune with his creation and delight in his own infinite, loving, triune self. Like, this is sort of classic Christianity and classic Trinitarian perspective on what creation actually is. So for us to actually know what creation is, or anything is, we have to first understand that that is the ground of everything. The ground of being is actually infinite love and infinite peace.
Yes.
And only after did sin and privation come in and things started to decay. But the first, and the way things are getting redeemed too, is through God's beauty and the beauty of the gospel. So that's kind of, I think, in what Hart is getting at in that, just at a very small, simple level.
I think it presupposes, the Trinity, which for Christians was revealed to us. I mean, in Christ. So it's not like you just kind of work. If you just studied the world enough, you would come to this idea. But as a special revelation, that now it makes sense for us to see it as infinite love, beauty, and communion, because God is infinite love, beauty, and communion in his self-giving tripersonal, the tripersonal dance, the Father giving to the Son in the Spirit from eternity. And so creation being kind of a gift. Yeah, not something that God needs, or like,
gift.
Hey,
Gift's a good word.
Yeah, and it's almost like a lavished gift, not something that, well, the son's lacking and the father needs to give him something, a bicycle for his birthday, but it's something extra, something that flows from their love and their communion. That's good.
They're God's being, which, even to say God's being is actually might be a little bit incorrect, because God actually doesn't have being in the way that creation does.
Yeah,
God
he doesn't exist.
Yeah,
God does not exist.
He does not exist. Yeah, if we can use that to turn a phrase,
right?
Because
so we don't believe in God, but right.
Yes, no. The point is that God, in who he is, he has no opposite. His being is as such that it doesn't have non-being as its opposite. Whereas we are completely contingent upon a million different factors, right? We need air, we need water, food. We came from our mother's womb, which our father and mother had to fall in love, and this kind of thing. So we're utterly contingent upon all these other things, where God is not contingent upon anything. Actually, he gives the ground to all being. So to say that he is being is somewhat of a misnomer. God doesn't exist is it's funny. It sounds funny, but it's true.
Right.
In the sense,
right.
He is existence, right? Like, he is.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. It's often sometimes the thing that we'll have a whole episode of why apologetics misses the point sometimes.
Especially
it's in our
rational apologetics. Yeah.
And some of that is just coming. We're arguing. When someone tries to argue for God's existence, it's a little bit cheeky, because there's more going on into it, at least in the theological tradition. And so anyway, so that's the ground.
I'm about to go up a whole rant.
I know a rabbit trail's coming, so
we need another episode. So we need a third episode. We need content, but
right. I won't give it away.
I think,
stay tuned.
Yeah, no, we won't. Yeah. remember, we think that God doesn't exist, so
Yep. We'll
stay
start with
later to
that.
figure that out. But so I think that if so going back to like aesthetics, right? So aesthetics is often, as you said before, like we think about the way something looks, the appearance of something, which is aesthetics. Aesthetics is essentially the study of art. I
Perception
think
of
classically in terms, yeah, the
yeah,
perception of
uh,
art and the perception of,
right.
beauty.
Yeah. Yeah, like
And
I've heard it contrasted to like producing art or works of art. The
mhm,
aesthetic is actually the consumer working
mhm,
to understand art. So instead of the person working to
yes,
make art, so it's the perception that the consumer has with their senses, and really there's
mhm,
kind of a pleasure pain um,
mhm,
impulse there, which is why people like Plato, Aristotle is better in his poetics, but like
mm,
Plato thought, art was horrible. It was it was like several steps away from reality, and
sure,
logic and rational, the forms, are
mhm.
more real.
The
Discerning the
forms, yeah,
forms,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
shout out. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
Anyway, yeah,
think
the perception
a
of it
lot
and
of a
working.
lot of this stuff. Well, I think Plato does some work to get
Hmm.
good metaphysical categories. Um, I mean, I would consider myself
Yeah, maybe we read him wrong. Yeah.
right. Maybe there's often a wrong reading, but also I mean, he's probably got some things wrong too. I don't think that any sort of thinker is infallible. Um, but so because for me, I would say like I'm probably more of a Platonist nowadays, just in my own like
Yeah.
how I think the world functions. Because let's not get into that right now because that's not kind of
That
what
can be
we're
another
talking about here.
podcast episode. I
It's
think I
kind of,
agree with you.
but
I'm
we would
more
have to yeah,
Neoplatonic than Aristotelian, but
yeah. Well,
yeah.
I think that often is there's often a judgment heaped upon classical Christianity from more modern theologians who would say Hellenism sort of ruined Christianity, where it's like, no, that's not. If you read even the fathers, like they weren't working from their Platonic categories, like they were working from Scripture, and then there was philosophy helped to parse some of that stuff out and give good categories and kind of revealed the truth of some of that, what was true in the philosophy in Hellenism. So, um, but so I think for me, when I talk about aesthetics, I think it's about the reality of how people are holistic, and it's not a gnostic way of existing in the world. That your senses, your taste, your smell, the way you hear, the way you see, these are all forms of knowing the world and knowing the world to be true. Our lived experience is true, right? So it's not just about being abstract or have a distance from something and then observing it and then mining it to figure out its data for information. A lot of times when you're encountered with like true beauty in the world, you're often at a loss for words. And so that itself would, to me, reflect some of the glory of God, right? So when we become encountered in the end, when we see God in the sort of the beatific vision, as like the tradition calls it, I don't know if I'll be able to say a single word. I don't know. I know
Yeah.
when reality is peeled back in Scripture, like song is just bursting out from the angels in Revelation
John
4,
falls
or
down.
even,
Yeah.
yeah, John falls down, right, and he's like, I'm dead, I can't to encounter this, which, thank you for that, because I think the book of Revelation, which is something I've been studying lately for school, such an aesthetic book, right? Like it's so aesthetically thick, yeah, visions, symbols, imagery, that to try and rationally attack, like go at that, you lose all sense of what it's trying to do for you. Like the book of Revelation is trying to shift your imagination. It's
Yeah.
trying what John wants to do. He wants to reshape the way you see and experience the world through images and symbols and even ritual. liturgical stuff, which I think Revelation can be read in sort of a liturgical worship fashion. But um, so
Yeah, yeah. There's a Christian philosopher named Gordon Clark who
mhm,
was he's a famous apologist and Christian philosopher, and I think there's still a school of thought that still follows him today. But he was a reformed Christian philosopher, but he was funny because he was also a rationalist. And I remember one time reading his worldview book, and I can't remember what it is. And then that I thought it was good, and so I read, I think, one that he had on language or something like that, and I really
mhm,
wrestled with it because he almost made it seem, and there's a whole lot of things going on in the reformed world, Thomas Reed and all sorts of things, common or Scottish common sense enlightenment and stuff. But um,
mhm,
anyway, his epistemology was so strange that it was sort of like Bible plus propositions equals capital T
mm,
truth, and everything else is just,
right,
yeah, kind of subjective, relative truth. And
yeah,
so people would famously say, well, how do you know who your wife is, or something like that, because he would deny sense experience and so forth as giving us truth, anything we could claim to be true. But what I always thought was funny about that is
yeah,
passages like that in scripture that actually, to know the truth is not a set of propositions, but the narrative or the
mhm,
imagery. And
yeah,
so, really, when we're talking about aesthetics, we're not talking about, well, how can we distill life into propositions or rational
mhm,
analytic thought or something like that. But we're saying, what role do things like how we're appeared to in the world, or how things appear to us in the world, how does art and music and sculptures and sounds, like you were saying, that you get
mhm,
through your senses, how does that shape our perception, and really shape who we are, that give us that kind of grammar and structure, so that when we put something into prose, we have to have the context of all of those lived realities for any of it to make any communicative sense.
mhm.
And so, really, when you just say, wait, it's aesthetics, it's like it
It's about the
opens everything
holistic
up.
way.
Yeah.
Yes,
The music I
exactly.
listen to matters just as
Mhm,
much as the movies I consume, or not only
absolutely.
that, how the habits I have with my wife and children, or
Mhm.
things like that. All those things that I sense and feel and
Well,
anticipate. Hmm.
yeah, I think for me also, David Bentley Hart again. I'm going to quote him a lot, and there's going to be a lot of David Bentley Hart here, so just bear with me. But I think he's really onto something. So there's two books I think in particular that were life changing for me. So the first one was Being Consciousness and Bliss: The Experience of God. That's the first one. That gets you into the world in which David like is trying to really dealing with a lot of problematic perspectives about God in the modern world, especially like modern sort of atheism in the Dawkins Harris sort of tribe, where they, Dawkins thinks he's trying to debunk Thomas Aquinas, but Bentley Hart's like, you're not even, you don't even not even speaking the same language. You're not even trying to understand what theism is actually trying to, how it's describing who God is. You're talking about some demiurge that's a lesser God that's part of the created order. Something like a Mormon God, or
Another whale in the sea.
yeah, just like something that's part of that could not exist in some way, right? So that book is really, it's a little more, if I, and also The Beauty of the Infinite, which is the one that I quote often and will quote often, especially in this episode, is a lot more dense, and it takes a little more, if you've done a good amount of theological reading, and if you have any reference point for sort of postmodern philosophy, whether it's like Heidegger and Nietzsche and Foucault and Derrida. That book is sort of aimed directly at that world, and then the response that he sees is an aesthetic response to that. So those are the two books I think, The Experience of God and Beauty of the Infinite, are the two that I would say are foundational for how I'm going about this kind of stuff, because he references a lot of other stuff, and then from there you can move on and start to like I've started to integrate a lot of other things. I'm not just thinking about his books. I'm also like integrating a lot of other thinkers and a lot of other Christian, obviously,
Right.
Trinitarian Christian thinkers into this, because once you start to see it that way, you can't ever go back, as far as I know.
Yeah,
Once I
it's
went
like we're
down this
trying to.
path, it's
Yeah,
result.
right. It really what we're moving beyond is the secular age, right? That's sort of the status quo. Is this kind of breakdown? And secular, I don't mean by, what sacred is churchy and secular is not.
Right.
But
Yeah.
this cycle is where you get the word secular. But the
Hmm.
the idea of the disenchantment, as Charles
Hmm.
Taylor gets into, we're trying to move beyond
Yes.
that because we think the disenchantment is nihilistic and a dead
Hmm.
end, right? It's a dead end.
Well, you also, as to attribute to his heart's what he said before, is like, then you can't actually know the world what it actually is. If you think
Mm,
that way, you actually sort of miss what the truth of the world is. That
yeah.
you've missed the mark. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
getting some things right, like because people can apprehend what reality is in some sense, because that's how we're
Mm-hmm.
built. God
You'll know
built
how
us
many
to know.
planets there are in the solar system, but maybe not.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
That can, but like if you think that they're only planets, if you don't
Right.
think that, not to get too crazy, but like if there's angels, demons, these
Yeah.
other celestial beings that are part of this hierarchy, then you're missing even the meaning of planets and stars and the moon and the waves, water. Like we combat this. The world is symbolic. We come at the world symbolically, whether you know it or not. You're coming at it through not a rational lens, but through like myth and even aesthetics. Like you're not like just thinking I'm purely neutral. This is another fallacy of modern thinking, is like you think anything can be neutral in the world, and aesthetics shows that it's not possible, because there's so much there's so much precognitive stuff that's going on with you, that you have no control over that, essentially. So you're trying to guide the sort of precognitive. And by that I mean like your favorite color is it's not rational why you have a favorite color. That's
Yeah.
precognitive. Like
Right.
colors, we perceive colors, and people can want to break it down like, well, colors don't really exist. They're like a fractured of the, how the sun and our eyeballs work. And it's like, you can say that, and that's fine, but that's not part of lived experience. That's something abstract. That's something other than how all human beings have existed for all of life. And colors are more meaningful than just it's refracted light, and the sky really isn't blue, and all this
You
kind of
can't
stuff. Which
reduce it down. It just to one
yeah, to
story.
reduce it, yeah,
Yeah.
reduce it to that, you're
Mm-hmm.
losing any what it means.
Right.
Because if you think that's all that it means, then you've lost any sense of truth.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think of too the importance of aesthetics that, or one of the things I think of is um, in thinking this way, there is really overall this non-reductive approach, and like you're saying, we can't understand things apart from it, and we're trying to move beyond it. I think that you can't understand things apart from myth anyway. Like to think
Nope.
that the January insurrection is not clouded by uh, all sorts of myth
Yeah.
going on between all
Hmm.
sorts of different players and different
Hmm.
tribes, different story. We've never lost that. We tell ourselves that we're grown up now. Sometimes people, this modernistic frame, we're progressive,
Hmm.
we're grown up, we're rational, but we're just as
Right. Right.
pre-modern as we ever were, or
Hmm.
just
We're
as
just we're
religious
just
and
yeah. Well,
mythical. Yeah.
we've lost the. So I've sort of come to this conclusion recently, the past couple years, of like, there's a film just came out called The Green Knight. I don't know if you've seen trailers or previews for that. It's a great film. I think you have to love sort of how film is made, I think, to really
Mm.
to sit through it and like it, because it's very slow and very, grinding, but it's an old uh, sort of folklore myth about this Arthurian King Arthur. His nephew goes to slay this Green Knight who in you can go watch the preview for the new. It just came out like a few weeks ago, but in it, it's about courage and it's about recognizing deception because you're being deceived. He's being deceived at every corner. So for me, what's I've come to understand aesthetics, even ritual and liturgy, it's about recognizing what kind of spells are cast over us, or like. So it's not about to me. It's not even about re-enchanting the world because the world is enchanted already. That's reality as it is.
Yeah, you don't
For
have to
me,
work
it's
to do
about
that. Yeah.
that's yeah. It's like G.K.
Every 4th of
Chesterton.
July, yeah.
Right, we're reenacting the myth. Right, in myth is not just about like it doesn't mean fake story. It's what gives everything meaning. And G.K. Chesterton says that kids don't have to read fairy tales. Aren't telling kids that dragons are real. He's like, children know dragons are real. It's just telling them that dragons can be killed, which to me is like, yeah. So you're understanding what happens is like, it's not a reenchantment. It's more of like it's learning how to recognize the pattern of enchantment and what kind of spells have been cast over you to blind you to what is true, right? So if we the whole notion of like disenchantment to me, that narrative doesn't work because it's more like something was cast over us as a human, as in humanity, whether it's like the Enlightenment, Kantian, idealism. Those are to me spells. I'm using this like because I think it is helpful and it has an aesthetic. It has an aesthetic thrust to it. To use to say spells because it's like there's sort of a deception that happens when you start to believe the world is like this. Uh, you know, like the way Kant talked about like the numinal world and the right. So he sort of tiers reality in two ways, and
Yeah,
you can never
noumenal,
know things in
phenomenal.
them. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you can never know things in themselves. You can only know like the sense experience. I don't know. There's a lot. There's another episode which I think could be good, but so it's about recognizing the pattern of enchantment and how to see the world as it is. And a lot of that comes through this kind of stuff because aesthetics penetrates you at a level that oppositions and purely neutral rationality can't even get close to. It just is like it gets to such a shallow level of what human beings are. So this is why,
Yeah.
like, to me, analytic philosophy just is not enough. There's a part of it where it's like we need to learn how to critically think and engage
Mm-hmm.
stuff, which is totally important, and I agree
Mm-hmm.
with that. But to like wholesale put yourself into that's the way we can know anything is through syllogisms and like logic. To me, it loses any grasp of like, yeah,
Or at least
see,
if you have to know something that if you read poetry, in the end, the meaning is all the atomistic distilled ways that we use sentences in prose.
exactly.
Like
Exactly.
you
And that's
translate.
not what poetry is.
Right.
Poetry isn't that.
Right.
Poetry is just a love for words for the sake of words.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying, like the way that even films happen nowadays. There's always there's a message that has to be a part of. Take Christian movies for example. They are a front for pushing messages. They're not actually pieces of art that people can experience true like have a true aesthetic or really encounter something deeper. What is happening here is like the art, the true creativity and the true way that people can be actually brought into the narrative is sort of set aside. As long as you get the message right, then it counts as true. So to me it's like film's a great medium because there's so many different things you can do with it. It's sort of like poetry with pictures, and that encapsulates such a powerful medium to communicate truth and beauty and goodness, where other realms just cannot even touch that. Because movies hit us in such a deep way. At least for
Yeah.
me, anyways, movies hit me really, really deep. Um, Even I was watching. You ever see the Truman Show with
Yeah,
Jim
I love
Carrey?
that show. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dude. So
That
when I
movie's
was
good.
watching it again for this time, I had a different experience of it. And so here you go. So here's something to like critique modern rationalism. So remember the girl in the movie who tells him that hey, that everybody's pretending, and then she got taken away because she wasn't meant to be part of his story. It was supposed to be, I think, Laura Linney or whoever, whatever her name is.
Yeah,
But the girl
I'm
he
not sure
meets in
the name, but
college
yeah,
who is not part of it. Yeah,
hmm
but this girl, all he thinks about is her, and what he tries to do is recreate her face with pictures of other women, where he cuts out the eyes, and it's like, oh, he's longing for the beauty and the truth that he encountered. He doesn't care, like freedom, whatever. I think is not really a part of what he cares about. Like, yeah, there's a part of like things are inauthentic, and he's recognizing that. But what he really longs for is like the beauty of this woman who helped him encounter the truth and broke him away from the shackles of his life. And
that's
but it wasn't
profound.
like somebody saying,
That's
yeah,
profound.
I'm serious. Like it kind of is in a way. I was
It
like, oh
is.
yeah, he's just like he's longing for true beauty because everything around him is inauthentic. It's
I can't wait
sterilized.
till I get to tell you my favorite movie because that's
I can't wait.
I've
Truman
actually
Show isn't even close to my favorite movie, but
yeah
it's a good
no
movie.
yeah yeah we'll have a movie episode and we'll dissect
Those are
something.
five movies.
I'll tell
Yeah,
you what
yeah.
I'm gonna dissect when that show comes.
I
Oh
can't
boy.
wait. So moving along, I think just try and bring it back a little bit, even though I think all those things are a part of our conversation. Um, do we have so epistemology? I
Yeah.
think it's just something worth just a short
How
little.
do you know what you know? How do we know?
How do you know? How do you
It
know?
if it's all subjective based on a sort of taste, almost your taste and because I know this, like you know this, there are movies that you just can't get into. There are movies I
Hmm.
can't get into that my wife's into.
Hmm.
Avengers. No, sorry.
Oh no,
No,
that's controversial,
I
man.
just
Watch out for
started. I
that.
just started a war. No, no. She's trying to watch all
All
the
the
Marvel
Marvel
stuff in
movies.
order. Yeah, and so I
My
get
favorite
sucked in
Marvel
with them.
movie, Winter Soldier.
Okay, I do like that one.
That's
Yeah,
the best one
yeah,
of all of them. It's the best. But
yeah. But you know, so it's taste, and there
hmm
is a kind of pleasure pain aspect to it. So then
hmm
what we're tempted to do is think, well, okay, yeah, but let's get back at the real, right? There's always the things hidden, right?
yeah.
And so we want to get back to that real, but wait a second, hold off. Okay, so what does epistemology have to do with this? How do we know? I mean, I guess we do know just through our perception, but I mean, it's deeper than that. And we're not talking about like the evidentialist tradition or something like that, where it's you're you sort of uh, patch up these sort of perceptions in a Kantian way. What do you
hmm
mean by how can aesthetics be built into an epistemology? I mean, how would we understand epistemology as having to do with this?
Yeah. It's funny. The further along the more you read, the less you sort of. I have thought about some of these categories in that way, where I used to think like I need to get books on epistemology, right? Like I need to get books on metaphysics. I need to get books on like it was always this like very fractured part of like doing any sort of study, which I think is still important. I think people should, if you're not like overly versed in some of that stuff,
I
I
think
think
it was
you
the
need to
first thing I
get
was
some.
into when I got into philosophy and Christian philosophy. I'm like reading
Was it epistemology?
epistemology because you're like,
Mm,
how do I know?
yeah,
Especially
yeah,
Christians,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
like, I want to know God is real or
Yeah,
something.
how do we know that things are real? Can we perceive things to be true? Which isn't a very important, and people should be reading at least some introductory stuff about it just to get sort of basic principles. But I think one of my favorite thinkers that I've encountered, his name is Michel Henry. He's a French phenomenologist guy, but he says, and this I don't know how much I can unpack this, but I'm gonna say it because I think it is how I'm trying
Give the
to
listeners a
perceive.
taste. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll give you this guy. He's got he's a book. I have it right here actually. It's called I Am the Truth Toward a Philosophy of Christianity. Yeah, yeah, hold on. I have like things here. It's okay. So that's the book. If you can read it, it's a little bit of a so Michel Henry, I Am the Truth Toward a Philosophy of Christianity. So, and I have a lot of it. A lot of it highlighted. You know, it's great. It's really hard. I think it's actually kind of a difficult read. It's he's because he's the way that he's operating is
So read
not
this
a
after you read your 101 books and
yeah.
stuff.
Do not go that way first. That takes some time. You need to sort of know who you are in the world of philosophy before you can start even engaging that. You know, you need
What
to
is
sort
it?
of
How to
have
read a
your
book? They say like read books harder than you can actually
hmm
think. So if you read it, go back and read it again later.
and that one might be too much of a stretch
It's
for
too
it
much.
would be too it would have been way too much of a stretch for me in the beginning. I couldn't have
Yeah.
even and even now after all 10, 15 years of doing this stuff it's like I'm still not entirely sure. But the stuff that I'm picking up on I'm like this is where I want to be in terms of epistemology, in terms of how I'm perceiving things. So he says the world is not a set of things, of beings, but the horizon of light where things show themselves in their quality as phenomena. The world does not designate what is true, but rather truth itself. The phenomena of the world are things inasmuch as they show themselves in the world, which is their proper monstration, their appearance, their manifestation, their revelation. So basically, that the world is revealing truth itself, which is Christ. And that's what the world is doing in the ways of like appearance. And so we study phenomena, and how we study that is they are revealing them. You know, this gets into like phenomenology, which is, I think, a helpful practice of understanding
Hmm.
how we interpret our experience
Different kind of
and how to
newer
understand.
orientation to philosophical thinking. Yeah.
Yes. So, like, rather than thinking about the world, so like, I like the first sentence, or even the first like half the sentence. Like, the world is not a set of things. It's a really deep philosophical statement that I agree with. Because if we think of stuff as things, then they're objects for us to do with what we want with them in some way. That somehow the world, I'm just a neutral observer, and these things out here need to be observed. I need to the idea that I could get information out of them neutrally is nonsense. Actually, it doesn't make sense at all because I'm bringing all my myths with me. I'm bringing all my loves, my desires. You know, I'm not actually objectively and ultimately really objectively uh, engaging things in themselves like that, like the sort of the lie of modernity tries to sell us that
Yeah.
these things actually have to appear to us first, and we have to meet them in our where we are, and that is part of what aesthetics is how you experience the world, whether it's like color, you know, taste, those things. That's what I mean by like that's how we can know the world. That's sort of what Henri's getting at is like if we think that what the world is for us to conquer and for us to control, then we're not really knowing the world, and we're kind of participating in the violence of sin, which is the need for control over our own lives. So I think that's part of what he's getting at there. I don't know how you took that, if you have any
It's good.
thoughts on what
Yeah.
he said, but
Well, no,
yeah,
I'm
you
just
don't have
soaking it in. I
yeah, you
think
don't have to.
well, as far as aesthetics and epistemology, I do. I think that for me, and I took, like I said, I started reading epistemology books, and I
Hmm.
told you about Clark, but I've told he was just
Hmm.
wild to me, so I didn't, But Plantinga is a little
Yeah.
more,
Yeah, planning.
that's better.
That's a good conversation we get because planning
Yeah,
was also a really important figure in my own
yeah,
journey.
yeah. And
Very important,
most
actually.
people, I think most Christians, at least once you get into this stuff, you'll learn about Alvin Plantinga, or you have
That
learned.
name will come up.
So
Yeah,
probably the
his name will
conversations
come up.
we're having, who we're talking about. But Yeah, so I think that one of the things that he did, and I think this does come through the Redian tradition, but it can come in through phenomenologically, which I like better, is instead of saying instead of thinking about knowledge as, being skeptical, sort of like the Cartesian tradition does, and instead of saying, well, I don't know anything, or we can't be sure until we can have it justified true belief.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then what's happened in that tradition, it's all broken down. So I've spent a lot of time with like Richard Rorty and the sort of
Oh
post-truth,
yeah.
stuff.
Hmm.
And just because of like you get this place where we don't really refer to anything in any kind of direct sense. Again, aesthetics. You need you need like you just can't break it down to he
Yeah.
came out of the analytic and pragmatic tradition, so he was
Hmm.
breaking this stuff apart, and it scared people to death, certain
Hmm.
philosophers, because he seemed relativistic. He was a conventionalist in epistemology, saying
Hmm.
like we're just influenced by how everybody's using the language and how we're setting the rules and the terms. We're the ones setting it, and then you get Christians going, well, no, God, but there's a dimension where we are social creatures. We are interconnected. We are communal. We're ecclesial. And so when we
Hmm.
denounce Docetism as a false religion, we're doing this together as an ecclesial community along with
Hmm.
the church authority. And there is that kind of thing going on. But not to rabbit trail again, but um, when
It's a good rabbit trail.
yeah, good rabbit trail. You could instead start with, and this is where it took me as semiotics. Where we're
Hmm.
always perceiving things, and science stimuli is even at the biological level. Scientists can do
Hmm.
experiments where you can make bacteria do certain things by creating stimuli in the environment, and it's just reacting to the sign of that stimuli. And
Hmm.
so it's even deeply at the biological level how we see and perceive things, and then how that causes us or brings to us different reactions and interactions. And so I think
Hmm.
right there you get aesthetics almost
Hmm.
out of the box. But
It's right there. Like
yeah,
the idea that introducing the stimuli changes things.
yeah. And it
That's
changes your
aesthetic. Yeah.
perception. A good example would be
Hmm.
before 9/11, you got on a plane with someone wearing a burqa, you wouldn't think
Hmm.
anything. You'd think they were from a different place. You might have a
Right.
conversation with, hey, where are you from?
Hmm.
Right after 9/11, for those of us who remember that time, people were
Hmm.
scared to death, and
Hmm.
you couldn't even just have a normal woman with a burqa on a plane without
Hmm.
people getting nervous. And
Hmm.
because the events had changed so much that sign, it still meant the same thing for her wearing the burqa, but to the broader culture, it had a different sign stimuli. And so you could do
Yeah.
all sorts of things with this. You can critique culture, cultural icons,
Mm.
how we perceive like ads and propaganda and information, and how that
Hmm.
changes from with different events, and how people can even
Yeah.
try to manipulate things to um, do crazy things.
Well, that goes back to the Book of Revelation, right? What's
Yeah,
John doing?
right.
John's showing you the Christian way of experiencing the world, as opposed to the Empire of Rome and their religious rituals and practices and symbols. He's actually
Exactly.
like, no, this is there's the dragon, there's the he's really trying to, because if you would only say like, yeah, this is evil and this and that, it's like, yeah, that works on some level, but like it works on a deeper level when you get into the realm of like symbols and experience. Like think about even the throne room where it's like the peals of thunder and lightning and like there's bowls of incense and it's all such an aesthetic. It's like it's so aesthetically like overwhelming
Right,
that,
you're
and even
using
the
the
yeah,
imagery, and not only that, but signs that have been created and shaped into
by
the
other
Jewish
stuff.
culture.
Yeah,
Yeah, by
exactly. By other
Ezekiel and
yeah,
Daniel, and so that by the time you
exactly.
get, yeah, for instance, the scroll, that has
Hmm.
writing on both sides. A hearer hears that and they're like, oh, Ezekiel too, you know.
Oh
So
yeah, they're like they can
yeah,
there's a reference
right,
point, and there's like a symbolic world that
right,
exists for John and these other,
hmm,
the Old Testament prophets.
yeah,
And even think about, the burning bush.
hmm,
That's like Moses is experiencing a fire. That's
hmm.
aesthetic. That's not just like God just using his language. Because I remember, I don't know if that's the story of Samuel, who, yeah, like he's like creating an experience for Moses and for the reader, that it's like all of a sudden he's encountered by this flaming bush that isn't catching fire. But like, so then it sort of brings a topsy turviness to your reality. It shifts the way you think about stuff. It shifts the way you're perceiving, right? So Moses is going about his normal way, and then all of a sudden this bush is on fire, but it's not being consumed. So all of a sudden his reality, like you said, the stimuli, it starts to shift, and then God can speak. And obviously words and are important, and language is a part, is also symbolic. Language is not just meaning, it's like it's not
It's
neutral in
not
the
two
way analytics
dimensional.
like
Yeah,
uses. Yeah, it's not two dimensional. It's like it's shaped with culture, and it's shaped by mythos. And
yeah.
so
It's
language is
not
very
I
important.
point to
So
a ball and tell my kid ball. He actually has a
mhm,
pre grammar before I even
yes,
do that. So by the
yes,
time we get there, that's what linguistics has found really, is that
hmm,
there's a pre-structure to the child's perception. So we're
hmm,
already, he's already been stimuli. He had that stimuli with his parents and everything.
yes. But we're
Um,
guiding him into
hmm,
how to see
yeah,
reality. But he
and
already
through
perceives reality
imitation.
really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, through imitation, through ritual, which
Mm-hmm.
can get into our
Mm-hmm.
this next portion where it's like, epistemology, which I don't know if we may have not covered what, but if you're listening to this podcast and you're into this stuff, you're kind of
We're
already,
sketching it.
we're just sketching it. But
Yeah.
so like for me, the when I came to thinkers like James K. Smith,
Mm-hmm.
who's really, really important, and I think Desiring the Kingdom is one of the better Christian philosophy books that's been written in the past however many years. Just because of what he's doing, he's framing the human person as a liturgical animal, where we're not just like a brain on a stick, a Cartesian, like mind body, dualist, like, we're not just thinking rationally, and propositions are not really the way in which we come to know and love, but actually our loves and desires are shaped by our habits. And so, and I think Esther Meek, I don't know if you've heard her before, that name
Yeah.
before, but she has a whole thing about covenant epistemology,
Mm.
where you recognize that reality is relational, which, going back to Trinitarian sort of foundations, if reality is relational. So I think she uses the example of like you're out in the wild, you're going across a bridge, and then you see like a meerkat or something scurry into a hole, and you're waiting to see, to whether like taking a picture or a photograph. You have to like engage it on a level where you're like trying to relate to it. You're trying to be patient. You're trying to understand like its moves, and that's not just like you being an objective observer. You're actually like engaging in a sort of relational element to how to know that. Whether even think about
That's
like the
how we
way
know
your
most of
relationship, like
things in
yeah,
life. It's relational.
it's relational. It's pure. Like even the way, like we just talked about, like whether it's my kids or your kids, the way they know what a ball is. It's like it's through ritual. It's through habit. It's through imitation that they come to really know what reality is. And that's at a heart level. That's at an aesthetic level. To bring it back even to our overall topic here, is that when you go into, often churches nowadays, especially Protestant churches, are kind of bare bones. You don't really have like liturgy that's explicit liturgy. You have more like, there is a liturgy, but it's more like a kind of a consumeristic liturgy, where you have like a lot of songs, and it's not like a sort of traditional perspective where you have, call to worship, a
Mm-hmm.
hymn, and you have sacred reading, and then confession and absolution. So like the way that we do these kind of Sunday morning things shape us into certain kind of Christians. And if we're being shaped by consumeristic habits in our Christian churches, we've already been, uh, what's the word? We've been bamboozled by broader culture.
Yeah.
that our churches are participating
Isn't that
in
why the Southern Baptist Church
slash.
is the biggest church in America? Because it comports well with American aesthetic. Like,
That's a good point. Like there's an American aesthetic that Southern Baptists tend
and
to
I'm not trying to
gravitate
poke
toward
fun
more.
at it, but I think a
No.
Southern Baptist could reflect on their liturgy. There's a one of my favorite theologians, Amos Young. He's a Pentecostal theologian. There's
Yeah, he's great.
yeah, there's a book, and I'm not going to remember what, so you'll have to search. But he actually walks through sort of a liturgy that he notices
Mm,
in Pentecostals that actually are kind of syncing up to a broader Christian
mm,
liturgy, or it's kind of playing off of, or sort of with an emphasis of spontaneity. Just the way that
hmm
Pentecostals might have an altar call, or the way you might experience. I remember going for the first time to a black church in Chicago, and where I got hugged by everybody in the congregation like 7 times for passing the,
hmm
but it's a passing the peace, like
Passing the
everybody's
piece.
doing
Yeah.
it. So there's
Uh-huh.
there, so liturgy matters, and that's the point. It doesn't matter. You have one.
You
Your
have one
church, your
regardless of, yeah.
congregation, yeah. So,
Yes.
and that's
Yeah.
that's the. So I mean, either we're, and it's not that some of it can't be um, have diversity, absolutely.
hmm
But when we
Yeah.
think
There's not.
about it,
Yeah.
the rhythms matter, and what we're shaped by in those
hmm
public settings, we will develop some kind of cult, right? I don't mean cult like a, drink the
Jim
Kool-Aid.
Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not like that.
But
But like
ritual,
cult ritual. Yeah. Which Christianity is a cult. Let's be honest here. Let's
right?
be real. Christianity is a cult in the most proper sense. Which I want to get back to that because I think we're always so afraid of like seeming weird to the broader culture, like behind the times. But I think it's high time to get back to being weird as Christians and as what we're doing,
Absolutely.
not like purely to be rebelling against, like as arbitrarily, but like giving people spaces where they feel like the ground has shifted, the
Well, it's
stimuli has started
yeah,
changing, right?
and it's about, again, what is it that makes a weird cult weird? Well,
hmm
it's always the myth behind the cult. It's always the meaning behind the cult. It's
And the
what
leader
the
is usually the one who like
yeah.
imposes the meaning rather
Hmm.
than communal
And just like
meaning,
Jesus
right?
did,
Like so,
but Jesus kind of
yeah,
his is fulfilling. He's fulfilling a prophetic tradition
yes,
that
yes,
he comes, and so and we you could
hmm
go all over the place with that, but yeah, what seems strange with a weird cult where you see someone get sucked into or something is the strangeness of the sign and the liturgy, the symbol, and how that is informed by a broader myth, and
yeah.
and then all of the other things that might come with that religiously.
But there's like an aesthetic
Yeah,
experience of
right.
cults, right? Like it's not just about the the propositions, but it's about way of
Yeah,
life. It's about a way of being,
yeah.
and at the level, it's like that's why people who are really become, I don't want to use the word brainwashed because that's too Cartesian for me, uh, but when they're so like enmeshed in in the cult tradition that it's hard to undo those ties because of how deeply it's formed into their being and the way they think about reality. So for me, the importance of liturgical knowing or even liturgy is it shapes you how you experience and relate to the world. In turn, how you know the world. Because if you're shaped to think of the world as for your own consumption and pleasure, you're going to treat the world as such. But if you have a liturgy that teaches you that the world is a gift from the infinite triune God, you're going to treat the world like it is a gift from the triune God, and we're going to treat it as such. So, liturgy is fundamental to understanding why I mean aesthetics as like a way forward, because it is about the holistic person. It's about like thinking about the incarnation and how God takes on our flesh and not he doesn't save us through secret knowledge, through gnosis, right? But through the shedding of his blood and the breaking of his body. That's how Jesus rescues us.
Absolutely.
It's not like Gnostic, like you have to ascend to this certain level. It's not this Masonic garbage that you have the different levels that you have to ascend to, and then you get the secret knowledge so you can be enlightened. But actually, God comes to us. He comes and encounters us. He journeys out to the far land to rescue us. So that's kind of like why the Christian gospel is so aesthetic, is because it's so overwhelmingly beautiful that we are at the mercy of its beauty. Um, and it's not something that we can just rationally approach. Like you said, I think you said in the last episode, like the way that we came to God was not through argumentation or like proposition. So if we trace back our conversation, right? So aesthetics is not merely about pretty things or like the way things look, which it is a part of studying aesthetics, but it's about our embodied experience of the world and the way that the senses can actually apprehend things as true. And we reject sort of this Kantian framework of, you know, we can't know things in themselves, but actually, like the psychology of our knowing is really important, and we need to reintroduce that into our understanding of how we apprehend the world and God and each other. And there's a deep mystery to that too. Like it's not we can't fully flesh that out completely. That like there is a sense in which like even to talk about these things is to recognize the wellspring of, you know, beauty is like endless, and I can never actually get to the bottom of it, which is cool, and I'm thankful for that because we're finite beings. But also like liturgical knowledge and just liturgy and habits and that shape our desires, which our desires are preloaded. It's a
Hmm.
preloaded, precognitive part of who we are, because ultimately all human beings desire communion and want in unity with God. And most of our ways of sinning are just like shortcuts for that. We try to shortcut intimacy, and sin is doing that. So when we talk about like even a theology of aesthetics, I think I just rather just call it a theology of beauty, and I think that sort of can encapsulate, I think, better. And so here, actually, when I told you before we started, I just want to read this Balthasar quote because I think it sort of does a lot for what I'm trying to get to. So it's going to be like 45 seconds here, but it's worth it, I think. So buckle in and just like for listeners, just take it in for a minute because it's really, really good.
Soak it in.
So Balthasar says that beauty is the word that shall be our first. Beauty is the last thing which the thinking intellect dares to approach, since it only dances as an uncontained splendor around the double constellation of the true and the good, and their inseparable relation to one another. Beauty is the disinterested one, without which the ancient world refused to understand itself, a word which both imperceptibly and yet unmistakably has bid farewell to our new world, a world of interests, leaving it to its own avarice and sadness. No longer loved or fostered by religion, beauty is lifted from its face as a mask, and its absence exposes features on that face which threaten to become incomprehensible to man. We no longer dare to believe in beauty, and we make of it a mere appearance in the order of more easily to dispose of it. Our situation today shows that beauty demands for itself at least as much courage and decision as do truth and goodness, and she will not allow herself to be separated and banned from her two sisters without taking them along with herself in an act of mysterious vengeance. We can be sure that whoever sneers at her name as if she were the ornament of a bourgeois past, whether he admits it or not, can no longer pray, and soon no longer will be able to love. There's so much
Wow.
there,
Hmm.
but what Balthasar is
You
getting
can't
at is
separate the
like,
three:
no, like beauty
goodness, truth, and
is
beauty.
so, yeah, beauty is like
It's kind of a
essential
song of
to knowing.
songs feel.
Yeah, good reference. I think that's true. I think the idea that there are these sort of three, and not to go to make Trinitarian references because that would be a little heretical to think of three as separate in terms of Trinity because it's not, right? Ultimately, it's just the way we parse it out. But truth, beauty, and goodness are inseparable from knowing the world. and beauty is a key element to knowing the world. And like I think what he says at the end there is that like when beauty gets away, when it no longer is a part of what we're doing, he says, man can no longer pray, and soon he will no longer be able to love. Because I think what we're really trying to get at here, and to quote Epicurus, who says that empty is that philosopher's argument by which no human suffering is therapeutically treated. For just as there is no use in medical art that does not cast out sickness out of bodies, so too is there no use in philosophy unless it casts out the suffering of the soul. So unless we are encountering beauty in what we're doing, I think we're missing the whole point of doing any of this kind of thinking, and you know, which can be probably maybe radical to some people to hear me say that, but
I think it's
I really
fitting.
do
I think it
stand by
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think it's a
yeah,
good place to start. And really why we
hmm
wanted to tackle this at the beginning of our podcast series is that I think it sets the tone and the foundation for what we want to do in the future. So, for instance,
how we're going to talk about anything.
yeah,
Yeah,
if we want to talk about movies or politics or whatever else, and we have crazy views probably, but what we're trying to do in this journey is like we want to go back to this as a foundational thing. Like okay, how does this connect up with beauty, with goodness, with
hmm
truth, and with that full revelation um, that we encounter in God's presence in relationship to Him. I mean, there's really just
yeah.
this is the foundation.
If we don't learn how to recognize what is beautiful, what are we doing? Because then you're not going to know what's ugly. You're not going to know
Mm.
what's decaying, because if you have no recognition of the good, which is God is good. He is the good that we are ultimately, moving towards, or he's moving towards us and he's dragging us along. But in our failed attempts, that's what we're doing. So for me, like to approach even like politics without this aesthetic foundation, you're going to be lost in a sea of extremes and chaos. And not that I have all of it figured out, not that we have it all together or even all true, but I think for me, like the sort of to recognize um, these different elements to everything that we're approaching, that we're not just approaching it from like a rational vantage, right? Like rationality is a part of beauty. It actually
It
is the
is.
most rational thing, right? Like that is what rationality is. It's like a perceiving
It is,
beauty,
and
right?
we can't separate parse that out and say,
No,
yeah, this is bad then, so let's just yeah.
I think part of it, anybody who's has been listening and maybe they've been frustrated with how we've been sort of encountering, like trying to express this stuff. I'm not we're not anti rationality, we're not anti arguments or anti logic, but like the problem is that logic has been separated from this realm of like embodied existence, and it is what happens is you start to abstract things so much into these categories that you lose anything on the ground, and then you start to lose you're not perceiving things well. And there's a need for abstract thinking. There's a need for this stuff because that's just how we function. But to try and say that the aesthetic realm is just a realm of how you see things in terms of just sense perception, as if it isn't like actually knowing things, or like experiencing at a deeper level, um, again, is to misappropriate philosophy. And so for me, it's like for both of us, it's like to have this as a foundation is to help give a really sure foundation that's rooted in God's triuneness and his incarnation and his death and resurrection, which are all still Jesus is embodied still to this day on the throne. And to perceive God is to perceive him aesthetically, because God is not often just speaking logic to us, but he's more meeting us in the everyday realm. He's more meeting us in the everyday experience
You go
than
back
people I
to
think are more. Yeah.
Revelation, he's giving both word
Hmm.
and the sword in his mouth, but also and the angelic beings are saying words, but there's imagery all around. There's
There's imagery. Yeah, yeah.
there's
There's
narrative.
sense. There's yeah, yes, there's deep narrative that is involving every element of our existence,
Mm-hmm.
and it's trying to reshape the way we experience existence. And that's what I think is so important about aesthetics. To try and wrap it up a little bit, I think that's what we're trying to get at here, and that's where we are in the journey, I would say, right? Like, this is where we have gotten to.
Yes.
And now I think it's probably the most sure I've felt about things ever in my own journey. Just in that it has rung so true to me, and it's been such a helpful guide in my own, like, day-to-day life, and even engaging in sort of, you know, harder discussions with people, is that I feel myself being able to be a steady presence at times for people, when a lot of this stuff, when you talk about religion and politics and um, anything that can be controversial, if you yourself can give off like at least this is what I found with this kind of stuff. It's like, I know that my true identity is rooted in God's beauty and God's, triuneness, and not in my identity is not wrapped up in all these other things. That I can encounter these things knowing where my identity actually lies. And that's the most important part about doing any of this stuff, is uncovering that fact of who God is. And God is allowing us to do that because he sort of stutters for us, I think, in some way, to use John Calvin's language, right? So
lisps. Yeah.
Lisp for us, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony, and I'm Nick.
Thanks,
and
Nick.
Yeah, we are excited to go on this journey with you, and we will see you next time. Please, if you like this, please subscribe. If you're on a place that has crypto, give us some crypto so we can do some interesting things with this podcast.
Or just talk to us.
Yeah,
that's ultimately what's most important. But
absolutely. All right.